You know, for over 1,000 years, a single question has been at the very heart of a major divide in the world's second largest religion. It's a question about leadership, about faith, about identity, and it splits Islam into its two main branches, Sunni and Shia. So what's the real story behind this ancient divide? Well, let's get into it.
First things first, let's just get a sense of this scale here. Around 90% of all Muslims worldwide are Sunni, and the other 10% or so are Shia. Now, it's key to remember that they share the same core beliefs of Islam, but the split between them, it all goes back to a question that popped up moments after the Prophet Muhammad's death, a question that has been shaping history ever since.
All right, so to really get this, we have to rewind the clock all the way back to the very beginning, to the moment it all started. We're talking about the question of succession. And you have to understand, this wasn't just some minor political disagreement. No way. This was a crisis that would end up defining the future of an entire faith. So, picture this. It's the year 632. The Prophet Muhammad, the founder of Islam, has passed away. He's left behind this vibrant, fast-growing faith, but, and this is a huge but, he didn't leave any crystal-clear instructions on who was supposed to take over. Can you just imagine the uncertainty? Who had the authority to lead this new community? And this is the exact moment where the paths split. On one side, you had a group arguing for something called shura. That's community consultation. They believed the leader should be chosen by the community. On the other side, you had a group that believed in wasiyah, which is the idea that the prophet had already divinely appointed his successor. So you see the huge question they were facing. Should the leader be elected by the people, or was the decision already made by God? The folks who went with community choice, they became known as the Sunnis. They chose the Prophet's trusted friend, Abu Bakr, as the very first caliph, or successor. For Sunnis today, Abu Bakr and the next three leaders are known as the rightly guided caliphs, the ones who legitimately carried on the Prophet's legacy.
But not everyone was on board. Another group, known as the partisans of Ali, or Shia, totally disagreed. They were convinced the Prophet had already chosen his cousin and son-in-law, Ali. For them, Ali wasn't just a caliph. He was the first divinely appointed imam, a spiritual and political leader chosen directly by God.
So what started as a debate over leadership, well, it didn't stay just political for long. Over time, it grew and evolved into two really distinct theological frameworks that, still guide the lives of millions of Muslims today.
Okay, here's where we can see some of those big differences. Let's talk about infallibility. For Sunnis, it's pretty clear-cut. Only prophets are considered infallible or free from error. But for most Shias, this infallibility also extends to the 12 imams who followed Ali. This gives the role of imam a much deeper spiritual authority than the Sunni caliph. And then you've got the Mahdi, a kind of savior figure. For Sunnis, he's a future leader who will emerge. For Shias, though, he's actually the 12th imam, who they believe went into hiding in the 9th century and will one day return to bring justice to the world.
So you have these big theological ideas, but how do they actually play out in the real world? Let's take a look at how they shape some of the daily practices of Muslims.
Now, it is so important to state that both Sunnis and Shias follow the 5 pillars of Islam. That's faith, prayer, charity, fasting, and pilgrimage. That foundation is exactly the same, but the way those pillars are expressed can differ in some of the smaller but still significant details.
For instance, take prayer. A Sunni Muslim will typically pray with their hands placed on their chest or just below their navel. They perform their 5 daily prayers at 5 separate times. And during the ritual washing before prayer, known as wudu, they wash their feet completely.
Now, for a Shia Muslim, it looks a little different. You'll usually see them praying with their arms straight down at their sides. And while they also perform 5 prayers a day, they often combine them into 3 prayer sessions. And during that pre-prayer washing, they typically wipe their feet instead of washing them. These differences extend to other areas of life too, like marriage. In Sunni Islam, marriage is a permanent contract. You need the consent of the woman's guardian, or wali, and you need 2 witnesses. In Shia Islam, there's also a practice called muta, or temporary marriage, where a couple can agree to be married for a specific amount of time. And for them, witnesses are recommended, but not an absolute requirement.
So you're probably wondering, where do all these different rules and interpretations come from? Well, a big part of the answer lies in the religious texts and traditions that each branch holds as authoritative.
Let's be perfectly clear on this. The Quran is the central, undisputed holy book for all Muslims, both Sunni and Shia. The divergence happens with the Hadith. These are the thousands of collected sayings and actions of the Prophet Muhammad. Each side puts their trust in different collections, authenticated by different chains of narrators.
For Sunnis, the most trusted collections are known as the 6 books. And among those, 2 collections by the scholars al-Bukhari and Muslim are considered the most authentic, really second only to the Quran itself in authority.
Shia Muslims have their own core collections, called the 4 books. Among these, Al-Kafi is one of the most important. They also place a huge emphasis on a book called Naj al-Balagha, or Peak of Eloquence, which is a collection of the sermons and letters of Ali.
These different historical narratives naturally lead to some different religious observances. Of course, everyone celebrates major holidays like Eid at the end of Ramadan. But Shias also celebrate Eid al-Qadr, marking the day they believe the Prophet appointed Ali. And the most striking difference is the day of Ashura. For Sunnis, it's often a day of voluntary fasting. But for Shias, it is a profoundly important day of mourning for the martyrdom of the Prophet's grandson, Imam Hussein. It's a day of passion, remembrance, and community grief that is absolutely central to the Shia faith.
So when you step back and look at the big picture, what began as a political dispute in the 7th century has, over hundreds of years, evolved into 2 distinct branches of a global faith, each with its own rich theology, rituals, and traditions.
And this leaves us with a huge question for today. How do these deep-rooted theological distinctions continue to shape our world right now, from geopolitics in the Middle East to culture to the personal identity of millions of people around the globe? That's something to really think about.